Hello and welcome to Module 3. For this assignment, we're going to create ourselves an on-premises environment. And in order to do that, we first have to get the virtualization software that we need and the server ISO that we need. And in order to do that, we're going to go into our course documents inside the assignment here. We're going to click on this link, and it's going to take us to where our documents are stored. We're going to need the VMware Workstation file, and we're going to need the Windows Server 2019 file. So we're going to download both of those. I've already downloaded the VMware file. So right now I'm just going to go ahead and download the server file. Now this might take quite a bit of time. It might be very slow, it might be very fast. It really depends on, what kind of computer you have and what kind of internet access you have. So we're going to go ahead and let that download. And meanwhile, we're just going to go ahead and open up the virtual machine software so that we can go ahead and install that. We're going to use VMware Workstation, and I'm going to just pull this aside so that you don't see this. Um, we're going to use VMware Workstation because that's what we've been using for other classes. It's free software now, so it's not going to be a problem. If you've used the VMware Workstation in 201 or 211, and your license is expired, you will have to uninstall VMware Workstation first, then reboot your computer, and then reinstall from this point. If not, then you can just go ahead with the steps that we're going through here. So once I've opened up the VMware Workstation file, the wizard will pop up. And we can just click next through most of this stuff, accept the license agreement, click next, add the VMware Workstation console tools into the system path. That's fine. We can click next. Um, we can leave this so that it checks for updates. I'm not going to join the customer experience. The reason is because VMware Workstation is no longer a supported product from their distributor. So joining the workstation experience is unnecessary, and realistically so is checking for product updates, but that's okay. We're just going to click next through it. I do want a desktop icon, so I'm going to click next, and I'm going to go ahead and install. Again, if you already have VMware Workstation and your license is expired, the reason that you have to uninstall it is because the new VMware Workstation doesn't require a license. So you have to uninstall the old one that does require a license so that you can install the new version that does not. And we'll show you how that works here in a second. Um, if you don't have it on your computer, however, then all we have to do is go through this process. Now we're at this point where we can just click finish. Notice that it still gives you the option for a license, but we're not going to bother with that. We're just going to click finish. And once we've clicked finish, you will see a VMware Workstation icon appear on your desktop. And we're just going to go ahead and double click on that. And when that pops up, we'll see here that we can either use VMware Workstation 17 for personal use, or we can enter a license for commercial use. We're not a commercial entity, so we're just going to use it for personal use, and it tells us we don't need a product key at that point. So we can go ahead and click Finish Through, and now we have access to VMware Workstation, which again, I'm sure you guys have used in other classes, or you will use in other classes. Notice that it is asking us to update, so I'm just going to go ahead and download and install that. Not a big deal. But then now we're at the point where we can let this update. Now we're at the point where we can actually use the ISO file that we downloaded. If it's done downloading, let's see. Yep, looks like it's done downloading. So now we can grab this file. We're going to show all downloads, and we're going to, oh, apparently it failed. All right, well, we'll just try and install it again. No big deal. Once that does download, though, we'll go to our downloads folder and we'll grab it out of downloads and we'll store it somewhere else. Um, for those of you in an online class, that somewhere else will probably be an external hard drive. We store everything on the external drive because I don't know how big your internal drives are. If you have space in your internal drive to create this environment, then by all means store it internally. It's going to be a much faster lab for you. But if you don't have space on your internal hard drive, then an external hard drive will be necessary. So we'll let that continue to download and we'll take a look here. Looks like this is still doing some stuff here. And once we have that all done, we'll go ahead, like I said, we'll open up the downloads folder and we'll store that data in a different spot. Okay, it looks like that file went ahead and downloaded. So we're going to go ahead and click on the file folder next to it so that we can see the um, downloads folder for us. Um, I'm showing you what I've downloaded today because you guys really don't need to see everything I've downloaded, but I'm just going to click on this Windows Server ISO file and we're going to copy it. And then we're going to open up the folder we want it in. For me, this is on my PC in the desktop under CNT 227. I'm going to create a new folder in here and I'm going to name it ISOs. For you, this should be either an external drive or a folder like I have on your desktop or where, somewhere where you can store these large files. So we're going to go inside here and we're just going to Control V and paste it. And again, that might take a little bit longer for you. It didn't take very much time for me at all. So now that we know where that is, we can close out of this, we can close out of this, and we can even close out of that. We'll minimize this and we'll go back into our VMware workstation. And now we can create ourselves a new virtual machine. To do that, it's pretty simple. We're just going to click Create New, stick with Custom, click on Next. Um, this is not really relevant, so we're just going to click Next through that. Our installer disk image is going to be in our ISO folder. So we're going to go back to our desktop, and this is CNT 227 and ISOs, and we're just going to grab that disk image. This is just like grabbing a CD and sticking it inside of your computer to install an operating system. So we're going to make sure that we select the right ISO file. Click Next. We're going to skip the product key because we don't need one. We're just doing some, testing stuff. We're going to choose Windows Server 2019 Standard. And for the name, we're just going to go ahead and type in student. For the password, we'll type in our CNT password, which is a capital CNTP at SSWRD, capital CNTP at SSWRD. Go ahead and click Next. Tells us that we don't have a product key. That's fine. We'll say yes. And now we want to make sure that we name our virtual machine properly. Now this name, we've had a lot of problems with this in other classes, so I want to be very clear here. This name is just the virtual machine's name inside the VMware workstation. You can see here that I have one called Server 2019 Core, Server 2019 GUI, so on and so forth. This is just a name that we can use for reference. This is not the computer's host name. So you want to make sure that you can differentiate between those. They can be the same thing, and as a matter of fact, they will be in our scenario. But that doesn't mean by changing this that you're changing the host name of your computer. So we're going to rename this to our hybrid AD server. And we're going to change the location of where this virtual machine is going to be stored back to that desktop CNT 227. We'll make a new folder, call it virtual machines. We'll open that folder and we'll create another new folder and we'll call it hybrid AD server. And that is where we'll save the virtual machine. Now, the reason that we want to give it its own folder is if for some reason something goes wrong with this server, we want to be able to delete it in all of its entirety. And in order to do so, we have to know where to locate it. So again, mine's in my user's desktop, CNT 227, virtual machines hybrid ADS server. Yours might be on an external drive. So it depends on where you're storing it. We'll click Next. The firmware type that we want to use is BIOS unless your computer at home is using UEFI. The only way for you to know is if you know. So if you don't know, just choose BIOS. Once we're done, if this doesn't boot up for some reason, then it's possible that it's using UEFI and you'll just have to recreate it with UEFI. But BIOS is what we want to use unless otherwise associated with your computer. Click Next. We'll leave the number of processors alone. We don't need to touch that. We'll click Next. We do want to make sure that we're using a decent amount of memory for our server so that it's not lagging. So I'm going to go ahead and use 8 gigs for mine because I have enough memory for it. You should be using at least 4 gigs, depending on how much memory you have available on your computer. We'll click Next there, and we'll leave the network type as network address translated. That's fine. We'll leave this as the version that it's set at. That's fine. Again, we'll leave the disk type as what it's at. These are only important if we're actually using specific things, and we're not. So we do want to create a new virtual hard disk for the computer, and we want that virtual hard disk to be 120 gigs in size, and we want to make sure that the virtual disk is a single file. Again, you guys should have already done all of this stuff. So if you haven't, you're in the wrong class. If you have, great, we're moving through this. So now we want to make sure that we put this inside that virtual machines folder, inside the Active Directory server folder, hit save, and click next. And then you can review all this to make sure it's all right and go ahead and hit finish. And that is basically built the virtual machine for us. Now we have to let it install its operating system. So this is going to take probably a couple minutes. And again, this is something you've done or should have already done. So this should not be new to you, but we have to have this environment in order to proceed with other assignments. So we're going to go through this process to do this. Plus, it's good to, you know, get a refresher. Who knows when you guys took CNT 211. I will probably skip some sections that take a little bit longer, that aren't doing anything for me to talk about because otherwise this video will be really long. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and skip this part and we'll pick back up when there's something for us to click on. Okay, the server operating system has installed and it's telling us that we have to restart our system for these VMware tools to set up to function. You can go ahead and restart. I am not because I'm recording this video, so I'm going to go ahead and say no. And then again, it's going to tell me that I want to reboot, and I'm going to just go ahead and say no, it's fine. So now we have ourselves our virtual server. So as you all know, now that we have a server, we have to do a couple things to it. First and foremost, we have to give it a host name. So we'll right click on our um, our start button here and click on system. And we'll scroll down to system info and we'll do some changes here and we'll click change and we'll give it a new computer name. And again, we're just naming it the same thing that we named it in the virtual machine environment. Just because, there's not really a reason why it has to be that way. It's easier to remember. We'll hit OK. And at this point, the virtual machine will have to reboot, which will allow it to do. It's not a big deal. And we'll go ahead and log in with our CNT password. And the next thing that we need to do once this boots up is we need to assign a password to the administrator account before we can go into Server Manager and install Active Directory, which is our goal. So we're just going to go ahead and go into Computer Management. And we're going to click on Local Users and Groups and open up Users. And we'll right click on the administrator and set password. We'll go ahead and hit proceed, and we'll use that same CNT password with a capital C and the @ sign. Now we have a set administrator password, and we can go ahead and go into Server Manager. And we can start downloading Active Directory. Sorry. So we'll go to Manage, Add Roles and Features. We'll click Next on our first screen. It's a role-based feature that we're installing. we only we only have the one server as of right now, so we'll go ahead and say Next. Notice that we didn't give the server a static IP address. The reason that we haven't done that yet is because later on, when we connect the hybrid environment to the online environment, we're going to have a specific IP address that we're going to want to utilize. So we're not going to worry about the server's IP address right now. We do want to make sure we know what it is, but we're not going to worry about setting it as a static address as we normally would. Now we're going to choose Active Directory Domain Services, and we're going to add those features. And of course, we're going to install DNS as well because you need to. Not a problem. We'll click next through these, and we'll go ahead and install. Okay, once it's installed, it's going to ask us to promote the server. We're going to go ahead and promote it. We're going to create a new forest, and the root domain is going to be our information that we used from the previous lab. So I used WCC mkid, um, and we did the on Microsoft, whatever. We're just going to do .com here, and we'll click next. So you would use the WCC, whatever your name is, .com. We'll leave the functionality level as it is, and we'll input that password that we are using, CNT password. Apparently my passwords are not the same. There we go. We'll click next. We'll click next through that. The NetBIOS name will auto-populate. Click next on that. We'll leave the database files and log files where they are. Click next. We'll leave the script the way it is. Click next. And then once the prereq check is done, it will allow us to finish the install. Yep, go ahead and say install. Unless some errors pop up, in which case you'll have to troubleshoot those errors. And we'll just finish the install. We'll go ahead and hit close on that. Hit close again. We can close Server Manager. And it should automatically reboot. There we go. And now it's rebooting for Windows Server Active Directory. Once it's done rebooting, we can log in as the administrator. And we will be complete with our lab for today. Not very long, not a very difficult lab. Just getting that environment ready for us so that we can move on to the next steps for our next module. Okay, now that we can log in, we'll go ahead and log in. Again, we want to log in as the administrator. So we'll type in our administrator name. And there we are. Now, as you can see, if you close out of all of this, you can come into Administrative Tools and click on Active Directory Users and Computers. And that will show that Active Directory is installed and our domain controller is visible. That's us. And we have some already predefined users. And that's it. That's all we're going to do for this lab. Like I said, not a very difficult lab, just getting ready for the next step. So I hope you enjoyed and have a great day.